for organisation administrators for InfoShare. My name's Mel Taylor. Many of you, in fact, most of you will have attended sessions last week where we went through a series of slides and took a number of questions from you about data submissions and the data submission process for the third and fourth quarter of 2022-23. You will also remember, if you were there, that we had a number of problems with recording and transcription of the sessions. So we have decided to do a clean session for you today. I will try and remember all of the questions that came up during the meeting and try and address them as we go through this presentation. All right, so thank you, Deb.
And I just want to acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the First Nations people, and that family is the cornerstone of Aboriginal culture, spirituality and identity. I also want to I want to say that I'm coming to you from Gadigal land, and reflect that you may be listening to this recording from the different lands that you come from and are on. And I also want to acknowledge past practices, government practices, including the stolen generations and the work we do today in family preservation to support Aboriginal culture and families.
Thanks, Deb. I think it's very important that we acknowledge the issues that have happened in the past and are working together to try and deal with them and deliver a better future for everyone. Thank you. All right, so the idea behind these support sessions is obviously to give you the information that you need to be able to submit your data for InfoShare for family preservation data for the 2022-23 year. As the organisation administrators, there's a number of particular things that you need to be aware of, including things around using various identifiers to name your files, and we'll go through those during this session. Key thing to be aware of is you're working with children checks. Those of you who have got working with children checks that are close to expiry, you'll need to keep an eye on them. The reason is that if you do not have a valid working with children check that is current, you will not be allowed to have access to InfoShare. It's well worth keeping an eye on. It can take about 4 weeks to get an updated working with children. Sometimes it's very quick, but I did it recently and it took quite a long time. So if yours is due to expire between now and let's say the end of the year, I would be keeping a close eye on it. If you can let us know when your details have been updated and use the new InfoShare mailbox to let us know what's going on, that would be good. It's infoshare@fax.newsouthwales.gov.au. These slides will be sent out, so you'll have that email address to hand. All right, so what is covered in this session? 3 key things. The first one being submission requirements for the 2022-23 Q3 and 4 data. The naming conventions will need to include a PLA number and some sort of hints and tips around data quality that will be important for you to pay attention to as you submit your data. Some technical support around access and troubleshooting. We know last time a number of you had challenges getting onto Kiteworks. And so it's, I guess we've got some hints and tips around how to do that. For those of you who've had it working, it is pretty straightforward, but it's very frustrating if you can't get it working. So we've put some hints and tips in here. And then a Q&A session. Those of you who attended the sessions will know that we had quite a number of questions. I will try and remember them all as we get to the end of this session, and certainly in the information that will be sent out to you, you will find that there are lots of Q&As in there. All right, submission requirements. All right, so those of you who are delivering Family Pres Brighter Futures and Youth Hope, the IFP program, Resilient Families, MST CAN, FFT CW, and PSP Family Pres, although if you're an exiting provider and you're not accepting referrals anymore, you don't need to submit. But you all need to use the InfoShare data collection template. There are 2 templates, remember, and hopefully having submitted once before, you've chosen your appropriate method to submit your data. IFBS providers are actually really strongly encouraged to use the template, mostly because it helps you collect the minimum data set. And if you provide your data using that minimum data set template, that will hold you in pretty good stead going forward in terms of service delivery as well. All right, so quarter 1 and 2 was submitted to us in February. Quarter 3 and 4 will be due by the 31st of July via Cartworks using the current InfoShare templates, either the manual one or the bulk upload automated template. You need to add your quarter 3, quarter 4 data to your quarter 1, 2 data. So we actually get the entire year's submission. Now, during the sessions, we had a number of you who had already completed filling in your data into the spreadsheets. And the prospect of having to delete or add extra data to another spreadsheet was a little bit complex. So if you are in a position where, as of when you received this video or when you attended a session, you have already completed your data, we will be able to accept 2 separate submissions, but ideally the whole year needs to be in the spreadsheet. And that is predominantly because if there are any changes that you need to have made to your previous data submission, you're able to do so now. But also, if you've got continuing clients, if you've put them in the first half of the year spreadsheet, you'll need to add them again into the second half of the year spreadsheet. So it's actually a bit double handling if you have to do it like that. So it'll be better if you can do it by with one spreadsheet. The data must be provided via the Kiteworks link. I know last time a number of you were super keen to get data to us, and it actually came to me personally. But this time we're going to be quite strict around using Kiteworks, mostly because Kiteworks is the department's very secure encrypted means of sending data, whereas email is secure, but it's not as good as Kiteworks. And we are sending private information around vulnerable children, so it is important to maintain security. You will have received the links from me on the 18th via Kiteworks. If you haven't, please let us know to the InfoShare email inbox and we will send you a link. This is just a little visual for you around data submission and its timelines. We do need to get the data by the 31st of July. We will immediately review the data, and in fact, some of you have already sent data as at today, and I am looking at it now, and if I see problems, I will get on to you quite quickly. But there will be a process post 31 July regardless, where we will reach out to you if you need to have data remediated and if you do need to resubmit. Can I just encourage you all to be very aware of the fact that your Kiteworks access will expire after 14 days. So I sent it on the 18th. As of the 1st of August, it will no longer work. So if you are going to be late submitting your data and you can't meet the 31st timeline, please let us know sooner rather than later so we can send you out a new link. All right, so this time one of the key things that is different for data submissions is around naming conventions and labelling. The spreadsheets last time, the vast majority of you have obviously taken the template that we have sent you and saved it as InfoShare template. That meant when they came back to us, I had 80 spreadsheets called InfoShare template. And it required then quite a large amount of manual intervention to then rename all the spreadsheets to line up with the organisation name. And then to work out which organisation PLAs were attached to which spreadsheet. So this time we're hoping to circumvent that and are asking you to include your PLA number as part of the naming convention of your spreadsheet. So the following rules need to be followed when you're labelling your data. Organisation name, no acronyms please. The operating and program name, the PLA ID, and then 2223 FP data submission. There's an example here that we give, which is, family Pres are us, Brighter Futures, Timbuktu, PLA 11412, blah, 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 with the data submission at the end. Please submit each PLA separately if you possibly can. But as I said previously, if your data is already ready, you will need to put all of the relevant PLA numbers into the name of the spreadsheet so that we can tick them off effectively. So I know that we've got everybody. All right. So one of the things that we spent a bit of time on in some of these sessions was talking about things that we learnt last time about the data. Tips and hints to make sure that we minimise the need for remediation. The spreadsheets themselves are a template. They have an inbuilt set of rules, and the rules are critical for allowing the data to make sense when you view it after. So the identifiers are critical to the success of the spreadsheet in terms of creating the link across the records. So we must have client ID, we must have the child story ID, we must have the referral ID, we must have service ID. So please make sure you haven't forgotten to fill in a column. And in addition to not filling in a column, can you please make sure that you don't add in or rename columns? The structure of the templates, as I say, allows us to load the data to our database, which will feed InfoShare when it goes live. And so if you've added an extra column or changed the name of a column or forgotten a column, the data doesn't make sense anymore. It doesn't relate to each other. When you're filling in the sheets manually, particularly, do them from left to right. So start at the org tab and work through to the sessions tab if you're providing sessions data. It's important that you do it that way because when you do drop downs, if you've put something in the client sheet, for example, the client ID will show up in the referral sheet. So one feeds the next one. So it's important to do them in the right order and not be cutting and pasting them from other places, or it might not line up as nicely for you as it should. And the other thing is, can you please make sure you're using the right data dictionary? So we had a number of organisations that were using, for example, the automated template, but using the manual data dictionary and vice versa. And there are quite different rules for both of those spreadsheets, and we'll make sure they all get sent out to you again. But yeah, just make sure that you're not mixing up sheets and rules, because in one you provide group IDs and in another you don't, and that can become quite confusing as you start to go through if you get them mixed up. All right, so a couple of the things that came up were around community referrals in particular. We've had a number of questions from a number of providers in the last few months, actually, around consent for community referrals. So, and you've got to think of this in terms of consent. There's two different sorts of consent that apply. There's consent to provide information to the department, and then there's consent to participate in a program, and they are different things. So if you do not have consent from an organisation to provide data to the department, like identified data of, you know, Melanie Taylor came to my service as a community referral and I gave her this, this and this, and I refuse to share that information with the department, then you can't send it to the department. So what we're going to have to do in the interim and in the short term, just for this data submission, is to work around the fact that currently InfoShare doesn't allow de-identified data into the system. So we're going to need to add the mandatory fields in the spreadsheet, which are client name. So you will need to put in something into the first name and the last name. I'd suggest the client's initials. That way the client is still de-identified, but we have something in those mandatory fields. And then in the address, if you put your outlet address, that will make it much easier for the department to very quickly work out that this is a person who has not given consent to share their data. And they're basically, it's a complete record, but it's de-identified. And then we've had number of other questions around packages, where you are using multiple packages for either very large or very complex families who are getting lots of different services. And there was a question about, should we record that differently in InfoShare? And the answer is no, because we are not counting packages when we are recording information into InfoShare. We are only counting clients. So if you have a large complex family, they have one referral, they might have two referrals. You simply enter them in as you would enter any other family receiving services. It just gets entered in as separate programs, separate referrals. And if it's a large complex family that's used up 2 or 3 packages, it doesn't matter from reporting's perspective for this purpose. Now, recording your data post June 30. So obviously we are the 24th of July. I'm doing this recording for us. If you have a case management system and it collects the same data as the Family PLAs minimum data set, just continue to use that, or you can choose to use the InfoShare spreadsheet template if you want to. The thing to remember though is once InfoShare goes live, whatever is in that template, you will need to rekey into InfoShare if you are a manual data entry person. If you're using the bulk upload spreadsheet, and you're just dragging it out of your case management system, that will be, a one-to-one and it'll be fine. But those of you who are doing manual data entry, just be aware, you will have to do it twice if you continue to put it into the spreadsheet. It can be particularly useful. I know there are a number of very small organisations who don't have case management systems and are actually using the spreadsheet as a way to keep track of what they're doing. So, it's really up to you to choose what's the best approach for you. But we will still need all the information for the minimum data set once InfoShare goes live. All right, Kiteworks. So you should all have received your Kiteworks access email request from me. It was provided on the 18th of July. I know a number of people contacted us during the sessions and said that they had not received a link. I believe that I have now sent a link to everybody who needs one. If you need one and you haven't got it, please reach out to the InfoShare mailbox very quickly and I will send you one as soon as I can. It is only for 14 days. So from the day you receive it till the 31st of July is when 14 days from when you receive it. So on the 18th to the 31st for most of you. You get a log-on screen where you have a username and a password. It's a very straightforward process. The very first time that you use Kiteworks, you'll get an email from our IT services. I think it's My IT at Fax. You go access the message, you enter your email address. Please make sure you use the same email address as the email was sent to. I have had a couple of people put in another email address and it gets stuck in a never-ending loop and becomes very hard to unpick. You create a password, you click create account, you get an activation email, and once you've done that, you've got your activated account. The data request itself is simply a drag and drop. So I have sent them all as a request for data, and you literally will drag from your file into the spot on the email and push send. You should get an acknowledgement within about 30 minutes of putting the data in. Sometimes that's a bit delayed, and I have had several of you contact me already. I'm just checking that the data has come through, and that's fine. I can check immediately whether it's there or not. So if you don't get a email from Kiteworks within 30 minutes or an hour or so, just send an email through to info@fax.newsouthwales.gov.au and I will quickly respond and let you know. You do get a reminder email from Kiteworks to let you know that the data request will expire both 7 days and 1 day out before they're due to expire. So you should have plenty of warning that it's coming. All right, so Q&A session, I think I have covered most things. There was a couple of other things that came up during the session. Now I'm just trying to remember what they were because I have lost my screen that I was looking at where I had that piece of information. So just bear with me for 1 second while I get this up. So a couple of things that popped up during the sessions were things about people not getting URFs and so therefore not getting a referral ID. Now a referral ID is quite important for the InfoShare template, so it will be we're making a bit of an action on our end at the moment to get on to our child story colleagues and indeed our district colleagues about making sure that they provide those referral IDs to you every time. But if you haven't got one for now, it's important that you put something into the field. So even if it's just a XXX or ID not available or something, and make sure that that carries through where it's relevant. My recommendation would actually be to use some sort of a unique identifier that picks up perhaps the name of the family and call it, Smith Rep or something like that, and carry that through. There was questions that came through around mandatory data and when there might be changes made to the data collection. Particularly people, I think, were quite interested in when service data might become, sessions data might become one of the mandatory items for data collection. We know that these changes will all have impacts on all of you if we make them. So part of the Family PLAs recommissioning process will be looking at what additional items may be required, when they might become mandatory. We will give you, I guess, a minimum amount of time would be 6 months because there are likely to be system changes required, probably more. I think the Family PLAs recommissioning process is going to have a lot of consultation sessions. I'm not really involved in it, but you will get plenty of notice before non-mandatory items become mandatory for data collection. And one other thing that came up a couple of times during the session was around family members who are not participating in programs. For example, grandparents, if they're not participating in programs, you do not need to provide their data to the department. So I think there's been I guess a couple of cases where grandparents particularly, it's like, well, we know they're in the family, but if they're not receiving services as part of the of service delivery, then we don't need to worry about them. And I think that about covers it, unless I've forgotten anything. All right, so no, I think we're good. The very last thing, how to get in touch, infoshare@facs.newsouthwales.gov.au. I think a lot of you also have my email address, and some of you actually have my mobile. I won't be sharing that here, but for those of you who do have my mobile number and my email address, feel free to send to me. But I would really encourage you to use the InfoShare email address, just because it is now a centralised team that is looking after InfoShare, not just me. And so it will allow us to get back to you faster rather than just me. Thank you very much for your time.